opportunities at home. Joining us now to explain is Dr. Jumashu Adugna from Addis Ababa University, who has studied Ethiopian migration for over a decade. Dr. Adugna, thank you for joining us. How are you this Wednesday?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So, Professor, tell us, you've been studying Ethiopian migration for over a decade. Can you give us an overview of why so many Ethiopians are leaving the country?
Uh, yes, many Ethiopians are leaving the country in search of better economic opportunities and safety. There is high unemployment, there is low wages, and limited prospects, especially for young people. That makes it very difficult for many to see a future at home. At the same time, people often hear success stories from abroad or through social media, which can make migration seem like the best, sometimes the only option. Migration has become a trend because it is not just about economics, but it is tied to hopes, it is tied to networks, even family expectations. In some areas, it has become almost a rite of passage for young people to live in search of a better life.
As you say, then it's not just because of economic hardships that are the main factors pushing young people to migrate. There are also social pressures, things like family pressure. Which would you say is being recorded as the bigger part? What the family is expecting, or what the economies are pushing these young peoples to do?
Yeah, I think all play a role, but economic hardship is the biggest driver. Youth unemployment is very high. Even those with education often struggle to find decent jobs, meaningful work. In some areas, conflict or political instability also forces people to flee. There is tremendous social pressure. It's a key factor also. Young people, especially in southern Ethiopia, for example, those traveling to South Africa, may feel pressure from family or peers to succeed abroad and support loved ones back home. So even if someone is doing okay, the expectation to migrate can be strong. So driving cause of migration in Ethiopia, too many factors play a role,
Mm.
but limited job and livelihood opportunities is significant, I think.
So, as you talk of youth unemployment, does it mean that the opportunities for young people to start businesses are too few for them to want to stay in Ethiopia?
Exactly. Limited job opportunities, both in wage employment or also in creating their own businesses. It's very limited in Ethiopia, and sometimes it is very limited prospectus with low wages, and the employment is not decent. So, yeah, in some areas, a culture of migration are already established. Uh, Success becomes related with migration, not working from home or at home.
Do those Ethiopians who leave the country, as you've found it, ever return?
It depends where they go. For example, those who migrate to the Gulf countries, it is a temporary labor migration. They often return, and so many of them reach their destinations regularly, and deportation is very high. So over the past decade, I would say close to 1 million Ethiopians being repatriated from Saudi Arabia alone. So there is high involuntary return to Ethiopia, and migration from Ethiopia is labor migration, which is temporary, and the return is high. Especially migrants from southern Ethiopia going through different countries, a dozen of African countries, half a dozen of African countries to reach Saudi Arabia, South Africa, for example.
Mhm.
They stay there for long instead of returning because return is also risky.
As we talk of those risks, then many migrants take these dangerous routes, like crossing the Red Sea to Yemen. So, what are the risks they face?
Yeah, the risks are very serious. They face physical danger from overcrowded boats. There is dehydration, basic lack of basic services like water or shelter along the way, even drowning. Once in places like Yemen, for example, they may be caught in conflict zones. They face abuse from smugglers or traffickers and lack access to shelter and medical care. Many migrants Ethiopians also face arrest, detention, even forced return. And women and girls are especially vulnerable to exploitation, sexual and gender-based violence along the route. So these journeys are full of uncertainty and can end tragically.
Is there enough education then and awareness within Ethiopia for young people who they know are probably going to leave the country, just to make sure that they are observant of the safety measures they need to apply?
This is a little bit mixed. I
Mm-hmm.
would say those from urban areas, they know the risks even, and they had the necessary information. But looking at the rural village that are predominantly prominent migrant origin areas in Ethiopia, so they lack sufficient information and awareness about how to apply for a passport, even ID cards, work permits, and where they go. There is limited awareness about legal migration options, and at the same time, they really underestimate the risks associated with irregular migration. So much more should be done in that area.
Are there certain age groups that are more prevalent in terms of Ethiopians migrating?
Yeah, Ethiopian migrants are increasingly characterized by young people between 18. Sometimes minors also migrate. It has become a rite passage even to migrate in search of a better future. So between 24 and 35, I would say this is the category where many Ethiopians move out of the country.
So, what does that leave
The-
then in terms of the workplace population in Ethiopia and the options they have? If the 25 to 35-year-olds, the young people that a lot of companies should be employing because they still, excited, they fresh, they are the ones that will drive change in organizations. What does that leave the workplace state looking in Ethiopia if these young people are leaving?
yeah, recently there is many graduates in Ethiopia. 70% of the population are below the age of 30. So Ethiopian population, looking at the demography, it is increasingly young, below the age of 30, and access to higher education is increasing over time, but there is lack of meaningful jobs. Wage employment or self-employment is very limited, and still many graduates remain unemployed for many years, and this really frustrates them for younger generation to aspire for education, and they consider migration as a quick fix to success.
So there are those who migrate illegally, and we've touched on some of the risks they are faced with. But what are the challenges faced by those Ethiopians who manage to migrate legally?
Yeah, there are also significant gaps in that area, illegal migration pathways. Um, it is really very limited and often unclear, and the process can be very slow and frustrating. For example, to access a passport, it takes several months to have a passport in Ethiopia, and there is also a lack of trusted information and support services. And this legal pathways require extensive documentation and paperwork that young people, especially from rural areas, lack. So it doesn't really align with the urgency of young people, and sufficient qualifications are required to migrate legal pathways. So there is really a gap in that regard. So more should be done to make it very efficient and very accessible.
Professor Adugna, we thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your insights here on Africa Rise and Shine.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Gemachu Adugna from Addis Ababa University, painting a picture for us in terms of the trends that are happening in Ethiopia and young people migrating, young people leaving the country for better opportunities economically, as well as social pressures that are playing their role in that.
In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube.
It's now 7 o'clock Central African time. We enter the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine. Good morning to you if you've just joined us. We are on the SABC Plus app on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as at Channel Africa 1 on YouTube live streaming. My name is Asanda Beda. In this hour, we look at South Africa's Constitutional Court having firmly rejected the Lungu family's bid to appeal a High Court ruling against them in the contentious dispute over the burial of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu. That story and more coming up. Let's get our news update. Here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. The Botswana government says it intends to raise $181 million by the end of next month. The government says the money will be spent on addressing the country's public health challenges. President Duma Boko has declared a state of public health emergency. This is how facilities experience a shortage of essential medicines, including the ARVs. The Botswana Development Corporation Managing Director Udeng Kyabetsi says they have been tasked with securing $340 million.
Over the last couple of days, a task team was formed to look at how do we stabilize provision of essential medical supplies to the people. And we requested for quotations on some of the missing critical items, and we received a quote from some of the local suppliers where the total amount proposed was about 780 million pula. The same list was shared with aggregates across the globe to see where we could land in terms of price. And we landed on average at about 80 million pula.
In response to the recent ruling by South Africa's Constitutional Court ruling regarding the burial of Zambia's sixth president, Dr. Edgar Lungu, the Zambian government has issued a formal statement. Speaking through its secretary to the cabinet, Patrick Kangwa, the government acknowledged the court's decision and reaffirmed its commitment to ensuring a dignified farewell for the late president.
The government of the Republic of Zambia has taken note of the Constitutional Court of South Africa's ruling concerning the burial of the sixth president, Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu. On behalf of the government, we want to thank the court for its timely consideration of the matter. While the government respects the court's decision, it remains committed to working with Dr. Lungu's family to reach an arrangement that takes into consideration the family's wishes and interests, but also takes into account the rights of the government. Our position is unchanged. The late president deserves a dignified funeral in keeping to the stature of his office.
South Africa's Electoral Commission says it will propose legislative amendments to the Electoral Act in order to better regulate objections that are made to the voters' roll. The IEC received 82 objections in relation to 8 candidates for the 2024 national and provincial elections, dismissing 7 of these and upholding the objection to Umkhonto Sizwe party leader Jacob Zuma. The Electoral Court, however, overturned the IEC's decision to bar Zuma from the party's parliamentary list. IEC Deputy Chief Electoral Officer Masego Shiburi briefed the media in Centurion on its preparations for the 2026 local government elections.
As you know, ahead of an election, the Commission makes available the voters' roll to facilitate interested persons to raise objections against the inclusion or exclusion of certain persons from segments of the voters' roll. So that will be one amendment so that the Commission will have powers to better deal with objections to the voters' roll to make decisions on a factual basis as it relates to objections that may have been raised on the inclusion or exclusion of persons on the roll.
The head of a Malagasy king killed by French troops during a colonial era war has been formally returned to Madagascar. The handover of King Toyera's skull and those of others of his court took place at a ceremony at the Culture Ministry in Paris. The skulls had been brought to France at the end of the 19th century and stored at the Museum of Natural History in the French capital. It is the first use of a new law meant to expedite the return of human remains from collections in France. Lastly, thousands of Israeli protesters have rallied in Tel Aviv and other cities in support of families of hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. The rally follows a day of protests in which highways were blocked and crowds marched to the homes of the government's ministers. They surrounded the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as security cabinet meeting took place there. A father of the hostage, Nimrod Cohen, has stated his demand.
They started off with an unfurling of a huge banner outside the US Embassy branch in Tel Aviv. On the beach there, a huge Israeli flag with pictures of the 50 remaining hostages. And then during the morning commute, many people on their way to work would have had their cars held up, particularly around Tel Aviv on the main roads, protesters blocking the roads. Tens of thousands of people said to be taking part in different actions across the country, and they're expecting a big rally in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv later.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onelin Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Madagascar as well as Morocco will face off in the final of the Chan 2024 tournament, while Venus Williams receives a wild card to participate in the doubles at the US Open. I'll have details of these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
So please get in touch with us on our social media platforms as we ask this question of the day today. And the backdrop is South Africa's Apex Court having rejected the application by the family of late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu on the dispute over his burial place, a standoff between the Lungu family and the government of Zambia. Our question is, what do you think it will take to resolve this deadlock or this standoff?
The KwaZulu-Natal Convention Bureau, in collaboration with Milvest Advisory and the city of Mhlathuze, brings you the 2025 Tourism Investment Forum, Africa. By positioning these regions for sustainable growth, TIFA helps drive their economic ambitions while providing access to critical capital, networks, and strategic insights on investments in the trade services sector, such as tourism. Join us for the TIFA 2025 from August 27 to 29 at Tembela Venue, Richards Bay, KZN, South Africa. Be part of the movement transforming tourism and infrastructure in Africa. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
So from our question of the day to getting a more in-depth chat on this very same topic, South Africa's Constitutional Court having firmly rejected the Lungu family's bid to appeal a High Court ruling against them in the contentious dispute over the burial of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu. The family had sought to overturn the earlier judgment, but the Constitutional Court's dismissal on Tuesday marks a decisive moment for their legal challenge. In the wake of this significant ruling, the Lungu family released a statement acknowledging the court's decision. For more reaction, we're joined by the Lungu family spokesperson, Makebi Zulu. Makebi, thank you for joining us. How are you on this Wednesday?
We will, and thanks for having me on this program of yours.
Firstly, and
Yes,
again,
please.
our condolences to the Lungu family. But what is your immediate reaction to the Constitutional Court's dismissal of their application?
Firstly, I would like to put it in perspective that the Constitutional Court did not reject our appeal. We had filed an application for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal and simultaneously applied for direct access to the Constitutional Court. And we were hoping that we could short-circuit the process and get straight to the Constitutional Court without going to the Supreme Court of Appeal. And in this particular case, the Constitutional Court has said we cannot have direct access to the Constitutional Court. We should first exhaust the process, that is, go to the Supreme Court of Appeal. Should we be dissatisfied at the Supreme Court of Appeal, then we can go to the Constitutional Court. So it is not the case that the appeal has been thrown out. The issue is direct access has been denied for purposes of us having to go through the Supreme Court. And as we speak, the matter that was adjourned sine die will have to be resuscitated for application for leave to get to the Supreme Court to be heard. And this is in no way a process that is intended to be antagonistic in any way, but it is a process that is intended to ensure that the rights of the family are protected. As you may have noted in the judgment of the High Court seems to suggest that once a person becomes a president, they become government trophy. The family has got nothing to say in the event of their death. Even the wishes of the very person who is deceased has got no say in the manner in which he should be buried. That is what the High Court said. And the High Court said that that was in conformity with the Zambian law. But there's no law in Zambia that says a person who becomes president or his former president is government trophy. There's no law that says that the family has got no say. As far as we are concerned, a person, whether alive or deceased, belongs to the family. And that is a point that we need to press on. We wouldn't want to leave a bad precedent that will be followed in future. We want the rights to dignity to be respected, the rights of the family to a deceased person to be respected. That is the essence of going to the Supreme Court of Appeal. Over and above that, you may have noted that the judgment of the court was that there was an agreement. And we said, listen, there were concessions that were not intended to create legal relations whatsoever. But in this case, the court says, okay, that was an agreement. But instead of the courts in one breath says, follow the agreement, then in the next, they say the body should be handed over from the morgue by the sheriff to the government of the Republic of Zambia. That is not reflective of the concessions that the family had made, because the family had said, we are going to come to Zambia. We are going to bring the body ourselves. In the same manner that we came to South Africa privately, we are coming back to Zambia privately, because this person that you say is now government trophy was not honored in his lifetime. In his lifetime, you denied him access to medicals. And his wishes and our wishes are that it be done in this manner. However, we will make certain concessions to allow for national mourning. But the privacy, the essence of the privacy that the family would like to have over this particular funeral and burial was defined by the family. And it appears that now there were changes at the last minute when we were to go back. There were changes to an extent that the president went and announced that national mourning had been cancelled and that life should get back to normalcy. At that point, the family said, okay, the country does not want to go on with this process. They're not acknowledging the fact that they're the ones that are changing the goalposts. We will therefore proceed to bury our loved one in a manner that is dignified, in a manner that fulfills his wishes and the wishes of the family. And at that point, there was a standoff. At least we didn't think there was a standoff, because government had made a declaration that they would not be interested anymore, or at least something that suggested that they were not interested anymore and life would go back to normal. But on the day of the burial, that's when we saw that interdict come through, and the burial stopped, and now we find ourselves in court. Yes, that is where we are. The appeal, the application for leave to appeal is still pending in the in the High Court, and I'm sure the High Court will be issuing a date pretty soon for us to pursue our appeal.
So, as the appeals are pursued, as the court processes continue, in the meantime, how are you or the family wanting to ensure that the late President Edgar Lungu's legacy is honored as far as engaging with the relevant authorities or community leaders, as well as the Zambian people?
The family has never been averse to the idea of communicating, getting to a resolution. What the family does not seem to agree with, and that doesn't agree with, as a matter of fact, is the fact that they have no say over the burial of the former president. They don't believe that the state or that he became government trophy, looking at the circumstances of the case, the circumstances of his having come here for medicals, the circumstances of his living was in Zambia. They do not agree, and they think that the state can only be allowed to participate to a certain extent and not fully take over, as the High Court seemed to suggest, or as they argued is the law in Zambia, which in fact isn't. So in this particular case, what is a dignified burial is that which the deceased himself said would be a dignified burial, and that which the family perceives to be a dignified burial. And that is what is intended to be pursued. And government has reached out for purposes of talks, and not formally as yet. They indicated that they would reach out formally so that talks may be had to see how best we can harmonize and reach some common ground. Yeah, and the process that is going to respect the wishes of the deceased and the wishes of the family, not a process that excludes them altogether or suggests that they have no say in the process.
Makebi, we thank you so much for your time. We're going to leave this chat there for now, and we appreciate you giving us some insights and updates.
Thank you for having me. I'm really grateful, and the family is grateful too. And we also wish to thank the people of South Africa for having hosted us during this very difficult period.
Great, thank you so much. That was former President of Zambia, Edgar Lungu's family spokesperson, Makebi Zulu.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Algeria will host the 4th edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair, or IATF. The fair, taking place from September 4th to 10th in Algiers, is set to turn the Algerian capital into the epicenter of African trade. As part of the build-up to the trade fair, Channel Africa's reporter Innocent Samusa sat down with Algeria's ambassador to South Africa, Ali Achul, who says the event is far more than just an economic gathering.
You know, the Inter-African Trade Forum will be a very good and very big event because it will reunite almost 40,000 participants, 4,000 exhibitors, and it will generate almost $4 billion contract between the businessmen and from all Africa region, and I think it will be a very good occasion for the Africans to meet, to exchange their experiences, their capacities, and why not to try to create an African economy. As you know, the African trade free area is now on the ground.